Here we are at the finish line. It's been a year full of bombings, pandemics, big storms, worst of all, dissertations, but here we are.
But it's not all been doom and gloom, and we have reported on some uplifting and light-hearted stories this year. So come and join us as we look back from our favourite moments from the past year.
Thanks everyone for joining us. I'm Ryan Gorman.
And I'm Kitty Vavasor, joined by our sports presenter Tess Penman.
Hello.
We kicked off the year with an exclusive interview with Serena Kennedy, the new Chief Constable of Merseyside. Tess, you attended her talk. How did that go?
It was a bit tense. We asked her a few questions about the rise in hate crime in the city centre and racial profiling and the trying to recruit more people in the police force, but she was quite prepared for our questions, and she said afterwards to the other officers that she got a grilling from us, so I think we did quite well.
Oh, well, there you go. Here's the final piece put together by today's director, Romy Grigg, and cameraman/editor, Joe Foley.
Merseyside's Chief Constable Serena Kennedy announced her six-part strategy for Merseyside's police force in her annual speech at Liverpool John Moores University. She gave an exclusive interview to Mersey News Live before the speech, highlighting her aim of prevention of crime is better than cure, with a focus on the force building community relationships. She also defended the purchase of the £46 million new police headquarters in Merseyside.
One of my priorities as Chief Constable is absolutely about community engagement. That's both from a partnership perspective and from our community's perspective. So the headquarters will enable closer working relationships internally and externally.
The Chief Executive from the College of Policing, Andy Marsh, gave his opinion on what he was expecting from Chief Constable Kennedy's speech.
I think it's important that she's picked on prevention as one of the first things she wants to talk about. And actually, when you look at the Pelian principles of policing, prevention is one of the first principles. And the sign of a good police force is one where there's an absence of crime, not necessarily just where you're catching criminals. I would expect, if the Chief Constable is serious about this, to see an operating model where it was very clear who is meant to be doing prevention, and it's too easy to say everyone. So who, how, and what evidence base do you draw upon, and how is it measured?
We are the pebble, the partners and us are the pebble that create the ripples. So we've got some really good examples. What I want is to deliver that in every community. So you get that really close working relationship. It needs more resources and it needs additional funding.
In the meantime, the Chief pledged to continue what she calls the relentless pursuit of criminals who blight the lives of our communities. Romy Grigg, Mersey News Live.
Shockingly, in October, our very own presenter Kitty was a victim of the spiking pandemic, ironically the day after Kitty reported on the issue for Mersey News Live.
Life is coming under scrutiny from the police and the Home Office as alleged incidents of drinking injection spiking multiply. Merseyside Police have confirmed they've investigated 5 alleged cases of injections and 17 of drink spiking since the 1st of September. Online images have been circulating of girls claiming they've been injected with an unknown substance whilst on a night out, reportedly waking up the next morning with a needle mark, or in other cases waking up with no knowledge of how they got home or even leaving the nightclub. LJMU student Ellen Jones believed she was a victim of drink spiking whilst recently on a night out in Liverpool.
It was somebody gave me a shot, and at the time, I never usually take shots, but on that night I did, and he just gave me the shot, and then he just walked away, and I thought, oh, that's a bit weird. And then about 10-15 minutes later, I was like, oh, and I just felt weird, and I just felt like when I was walking, I felt I was like floating, and then apparently I blacked out. Like I was on the floor in Bold Street for like hours until I got carried home basically, and then I woke up and I just don't remember what happened in Bull Street or anything.
These attacks are not always limited to nighttime venues.
It was about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. We drank the drink, and that's the last thing I personally remember. My friends then put me in a taxi because I couldn't walk. My legs had given way by this point and I was barely conscious. My friend rang me 10 minutes later and the police answered my phone and told them I was on Regent Street and completely unconscious. Very humiliating. I was lying in my own vomit in the street. I was spiked with GHB, which is like a traditional date rape drug. It's a very scary experience, especially as it happened in broad daylight in one of the most tourist heavy areas of London. and they've potentially just got away with it.
200 drink spiking incidents have been reported on, but there are doubts surrounding the claims that needles are being used, as journalist Sophia Smith-Gaylor has discovered.
Guy Jones, senior scientist at drugs charity The Loop, said injecting adds a big what factor to the whole thing because few drugs would be able to be injected like this. One common spiking drug, he says, would be a poor candidate for injection due to the large amount of fluid needed and therefore the thick, painful needle. This means that the substance involved would be something that would be highly detectable for several days in a toxicology screening. But then an emergency medicine consultant told us there are a couple of things that are disconcerting about the story. The technical and medical knowledge required to perform this would make this deeply improbable.
Meanwhile, Merseyside police say they are still investigating 3 reports of attacks on young girls and say every case will be taken seriously. Kitty Vavassor for Mersey News Live. Over the years, Liverpool has been at the heart of many major news stories, such as Hillsborough and James Bolger. These are etched into the city's history, and only last week a 15-year-old girl was shot while waiting for a bus home from school.
And on November 25th, the city went into mourning for 12-year-old Ava White, tributes marking the spot where she died as hundreds of others gathered to watch the switching on of the Christmas lights. We also can't forget the city has experienced its first terrorist attack since the 70s. Rhoda and Giovanna, you were at the Women's Hospital during the aftermath. Can you tell us about the experience and what it was like reporting there?
I think it was a very surreal experience. Everyone was quite shocked at what happened to the city here in Liverpool. I think no one expected something like this to happen, and I mean, with all the nervousness, that was a present. I think it was quite scary at the beginning, but a lot of us were reassured because of police presence and because of how the investigation went on.
So you felt safe the whole time?
I think at the beginning it wasn't as, I mean, Giovanna and I didn't feel as safe having been there for 4 days since the incident happened. But later on, I think the police presence allowed us to, I guess, reassure ourselves that, yes, something is happening, yes, they're taking control.
Here's a package about that.
On Remembrance Sunday, a terrorist attack took place in Liverpool city centre. The passenger, Ahmad al-Swilmeen, was declared dead at the scene after detonating the bomb. The taxi driver, David Perry, managed to escape the car and was treated for injuries. Since then, more than £40,000 has been raised for him as a show of thanks and support from the public. 4 men were arrested in connection with the car explosion that evening, but were released shortly after, and the Prime Minister increased the terror threat level from substantial to severe. The incident has left the community concerned for their welfare. LJMU Vice-Chancellor of Strategic Initiatives, Phil Vickerman, said steps have been put in place to protect the university.
There's not been significant sort of issues of concern raised by students. We have had staff that have asked us what further things we're doing, and some of it is just reinforcing what we're doing, but also demonstrating that we are taking appropriate actions as need be.
The attack was the first of its nature to occur in Liverpool. We can only hope it will be the last. Kitty Vavassor from Mersey News Live. And it's not just news, we've also been covering the big sporting moments throughout the year. Tess, over to you.
It's been a successful year already for Liverpool. They beat Chelsea on penalties to win the Carabao Cup last week at Wembley. They're in the upcoming quarter-finals for the FA Cup and the knockout stage in the Champions League, and still in a title race with Man City. And Everton have been Everton. They're 1 point away from the relegation zone, and they still have to play United, Chelsea and the Mersey rivals. But my personal sporting achievement this year was interviewing Jamie Carragher about the importance of the Alder Hey neonatal unit.
In December, we threw on our festive jumpers and Santa came early with the gift of Steve, Kate and Shirley singing. Wasn't that beautiful?
Some Christmas present.
Gorgeous vocal, Shirley.
In February, Liverpool was hit by a number of storms, making for challenging conditions for the public and presenters alike.
Rain, I think the mix of the rain and
last
the people just head to work all at the same time just was a nightmare getting through.
Storm barriers in swing all across the UK. It's been said that Merseyside's going to be avoiding the brunt of it, but as you can see, it's still been pretty badly affected. Cheshire's been issued with the yellow weather warning. North Wales can be facing winds up to 70 miles per hour. So be ready for a gusty week ahead of you. Back to you in the studio.
From the last year, Joe Zebedee, we've already seen you in your car facing the weather, but what are you most proud of this year?
I am most proud of my Thornton post office story. It took a few weeks to get ready. I spent a lot of time in the village of Thornton going around trying to get box pops, getting shots of the village, and I eventually got an interview with the leader of the parish council, which I'm very proud of. And here are the results of my efforts. This is Thornton's post office. Now boarded up and with a sale sign, the once mainstay of the village now faces an uncertain future.
I think it's a real worry, a real concern that the post office is closing. It's been there for years. Obviously, the postmaster has retired, and she's worked long and hard there, which is she's really provided for the community. But it is somewhere that I use regularly. I got my newspaper delivered from the post office, but that's also the thing. Even though there is this suggestion that it is just temporary, you think about things from newspaper delivery for people who can't just walk up to the shop every day and buy a newspaper. It's their key to the world sometimes, that coming through the door. But also you're thinking about banks locally, high street banks closing. It offers that banking service. It offers mail delivery service as well. People go in there to send mail from that point. And so who suffers the most from that? It's the elderly, people who, the more vulnerable, those who can't walk or travel long distances or don't have a car. And of course, also the vulnerable.
These statistics from Citizens Advice convey the seriousness of the situation. Since 2020, 1,291 post offices have been deemed temporarily closed. However, 6 in 10 of those never reopen.
It's great that it has been suggested that it is a temporary closure and they're looking to find another location in Thornton or near to Thornton to open a new post office. But if that doesn't happen, and when you say 6 in 10, that actually doesn't happen, that's a real concern. Yeah, it is. It's not only for the fact of people having to travel long distances as well. You've got the knock-on effects. You've got the knock-on effects of the Crescent. Up at the Crescent, you see there's a couple of empty shops now, a couple of empty units, and the post office was somewhere which would attract footfall. Other businesses would certainly benefit from the fact that the post office is open, and with that being closed, if that becomes a long-term closure, in actual fact a permanent closure and not just temporary, then that would be, I believe, devastating for the community.
Although you always see us on screen, we have a mega news team producing the website Mersey News Live and our fortnightly magazine along with radio bulletins. Like us, they cover news and features from around the region, and the readership comes from as far afield as America and Finland. We caught up with some of them earlier today.
So it's face to face or on the phone that I probably could not have done 2 years ago when we started.
I really enjoyed doing the Santa Dash. I think that was quite good because we got a press pass, so we got to look behind the scenes a bit, and then I got to interview Jamie Carragher with Tess, so I think that was a real highlight.
I really enjoyed writing the story about the Chief Constable. She came in and we interviewed her, and we got to do a double page spread on the magazine, and we also wrote a story on the day, so it was like being in a real newsroom because we had to turn it around quite quickly, so that was fun.
So what's been your highlight of the past year?
Highlight of the past year with the news days, probably an interview I did with a trans comedian. That was really insightful. Probably the story I'm proudest of as well.
I interviewed a comedian for about a new open mic night that you were starting, and it was really interesting, the interview, and to actually be able to go and interview someone in person, after being stuck at home doing Zoom interviews for a year, it was great. Being able to just actually go and do things, being able to use the facilities, being able to interview people, just that, really being able to actually get involved a bit more.
And some of them are here with us now, Joe.
What are you most proud of this year in terms of the news that you've produced?
I did a story for the magazine about something called the Turtle Song Project, which was about professional musicians being paired up with people suffering with dementia and memory loss, and together they made a few songs and did a concert at the end of the programme, and I interviewed one of the organisers of it. And it was nice.
Thank you. And how about you?
Well, other than the Santa Dash, I quite like doing the World AIDS Quilt Memorial. I did that with Kitty. So yeah, I think that was really interesting.
Thank you so much for that.
They were great stories there, and that's it for another year.
But we can't sign off without bringing down our production team today. Romy Grigg, Joe Foley, Emma Carter and Giovanna Thompson and Joe Zebedee. Come on down and take a bow, and then we'll get back on with our dissertations.
We're not taking our bow.
Take a bow.
Come on, bye.
Come on.